Welcome back to another episode of Out Loud Geek, where we discuss news and views about pop culture, science fiction, fantasy, food, cooking, the outdoors, and more. For the weekend that ended on July 14th, 2024, it was another fairly good weekend at the domestic box office thanks in part to the two animated sequels, Illumination Entertainment's sequel entitled Despicable Me 4 and Disney Pixar's sequel entitled Inside Out 2. And when their combined domestic box office earnings are added to the similar earnings for the other three movies that make up this weekend's top 5 movies at the domestic box office, it was around $109.8 million, which was around 21.2% lower than last week's cumulative domestic box office total of $139.3 million. And two of this weekend's top 5 movies at the domestic box office premiered this weekend. But before proceeding, I'd like to ask everyone to please like this video, please share the video on social media, please subscribe to support this channel, and please press the bell to receive notifications. Thanks! No changes occurred this weekend with this year's current top 3 highest grossing movies both domestically and worldwide, but changes are very likely going to occur very soon. The highest grossing movie so far this year, both domestically and globally, remains Disney Pixar's animated movie entitled Inside Out 2. The movie earned another $20.7 million domestically this weekend and another $17.7 million during the week to bring its current domestic box office total up to $572.6 million, and it remains the first and only movie in 2024 to break $500 million domestically. And it will probably break $600 million domestically within the next 2 weeks. Internationally, the movie earned another $94.9 million to bring its current international box office total up to $777.5 million. So globally, Inside Out 2 earned another $132.9 million to bring its current global gross box office total up to $1,350.1 million, and it remains the only movie so far this year to break $1 billion globally. In terms of estimated break-even points, Inside Out 2 has a reported production budget of $200 million, which, when multiplied by 2.5 and 3.0 respectively, to account for the 50% of gross box office ticket sales that movie theaters keep for themselves, as well as the additional costs of marketing the movie and other miscellaneous costs that the studio pays above and beyond the production budget, yields an estimated break-even point range of $500 million to $600 million. Thus, Inside Out 2 has most definitely made bank, and I'll be projecting its possible final domestic and global gross box office earnings later in the video. As for Dune Part 2, it currently remains the second highest grossing movie both domestically and worldwide, with final domestic earnings of $282.1 million and a final global gross box office total of $711.8 million. With a production budget of $190 million, when multiplied by 2.5 and 3.0 respectively, we get an estimated break-even point range of $475 million to $570 million. So the movie most definitely made bank. And Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire remains the third highest grossing movie both domestically and worldwide. With no new box office earnings reported this weekend, its final domestic box office total remains at $196.4 million, while its current global gross box office total remains at $569.9 million. With its reported production budget of $135 million, when multiplied by 2.5 and 3.0 respectively, we get an estimated break-even point ranging from $337.5 million to $405 million. Thus, Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire also made bank. So this weekend's top 5 movies at the domestic box office included the following. Illumination Entertainment's animated sequel, Despicable Me 4, remained at number 1. The horror crime thriller entitled Longlegs that was produced by 7 different companies opened at number 2. Disney Pixar's animated movie Inside Out 2 fell to number 3. Paramount Pictures' sci-fi horror movie A Quiet Place Day 1 fell to number 4. And rounding out the top 5 was Apple Original Films movie Fly Me to the Moon that opened at number 5. Despicable Me 4 earned another $44.7 million domestically to bring its current domestic box office total up to $211.1 million. Internationally, the movie earned another $119.8 million to bring its current international box office total up to $226.7 million. So globally, the movie earned another $208.3 million to bring its current global gross box office total up to $437.8 million. Longlegs opened this weekend and earned $22.6 million domestically, which is also its current global gross box office total because no international box office earnings have yet been reported. And since I already talked about the box office for Inside Out 2, I'll skip to A Quiet Place Day 1, which earned another $11.8 million domestically to bring its current domestic box office total up to $116.2 million. Internationally, the movie earned another $20.7 million to bring its current international box office total up to $104.5 million. So globally, the movie earned another $43 million to bring its current global gross box office total up to $220.7 million. Fly Me to the Moon opened by earning $10 million domestically and $9 million internationally for a global gross opening weekend box office total of $19 million. I'm also continuing to track several other movies that are no longer in the top 5, which includes the following. Sony and Columbia Pictures movie Bad Boys Ride or Die fell to number 6. New Line Cinema's Old West drama Horizon and American Saga Chapter 1 starring Kevin Costner fell to number 7. Disney and 20th Century Fox's sci-fi movie sequel Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes rose to number 12. Regency and Tri-State Pictures movie The Bikeriders fell to number 14. Universal Pictures movie The Fall Guy fell to number 16. Columbia Pictures' The Garfield Movie fell to number 17. And finally, as of this weekend, Paramount Pictures' animated/live-action fantasy comedy entitled If dropped to number 19. Domestically, Bad Boys Ride or Die earned another $4.4 million to bring its current domestic box office total up to $184.9 million. Internationally, the movie earned another $10.3 million to bring its current international box office total up to $193.1 million. Thus, globally, the movie earned another $17.7 million to bring its current global gross box office total up to $378 million. Domestically, Horizon and American Saga Chapter 1 earned another $2.4 million to bring its current domestic box office total up to $27 million. Internationally, the movie earned another $371,000 to bring its current international box office total up to $1.4 million. So globally, the movie earned another $5.3 million to bring its current global gross box office total up to $28.5 million. Domestically, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes earned another $443,000 to bring its current domestic box office total up to $170.4 million. Internationally, the movie earned another $3.5 million to bring its current international box office total up to $224.9 million. So globally, the movie earned another $4.3 million to bring its current global gross box office total up to $395.4 million. Domestically, The Bikeriders earned another $410,000 to bring its current domestic box office total up to $20.3 million. Internationally, the movie earned another $2.1 million to bring its current international box office total up to $12.2 million. So globally, the movie earned another $3.1 million to bring its current global gross box office total up to $32.6 million. Domestically, The Fall Guy earned another $321,000 to bring its current domestic box office total up to $92.8 million. Internationally, the movie earned another $1.1 million to bring its current international box office total up to $84.8 million. So globally, the movie earned another $1.7 million to bring its current global gross box office total up to $177.5 million. The Garfield movie earned another $200,000 domestically to bring its current domestic box office total up to $91.6 million. Internationally, no new box office was reported, so its current international box office total remains at $153.8 million. So the movie's current global gross box office total rose slightly to $245.4 million. Domestically, the movie entitled If earned another $125,000 to bring its current domestic box office total up to $111.1 million. Internationally, no new box office was reported, so the movie's international box office total remains at $74.7 million. So globally, the movie's current global gross box office total rose to $185.8 million. Now, to know whether these movies are going to break even or not, as well as how much money they might be losing, we need to look at their production budgets, which we can then multiply by 2.5 for a single mid-range estimated break-even point, or by both 2.5 and 3.0 for a broader estimated break-even point range. For Despicable Me 4, with its reported production budget of $100 million, that yields an estimated break-even point range of $250 million to $300 million. For A Quiet Place Day 1, with its reported production budget of $67 million, that yields an estimated break-even point range of $167.5 million to $201 million. For Fly Me to the Moon, with its reported production budget of $100 million, that yields an estimated mid-range break-even point of $250 million. For Bad Boys Ride or Die, with its reported high production budget of $100 million, that yields an estimated break-even point range of $250 million to $300 million. For Horizon: An American Saga Chapter 1, with its reported production budget of $50 million, that yields an estimated break-even point range of $125 million to $150 million. For Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, with its even higher $165 million production budget, we get an estimated break-even point range of $412.5 million to $495 million. For the Bikeriders, with its reported moderately high production budget of $40 million, yields an estimated mid-range break-even point of $100 million. For The Fall Guy, with its $125 million production budget, we get an estimated mid-range break-even point of $312.5 million. For the Garfield Movie, with its $60 million production budget, that yields an estimated break-even point range of $150 million to $180 million. For the movie entitled If, with its very high $110 million production budget, we get an estimated break-even point range of $275 million to $330 million. In this video, I am no longer projecting what the final domestic or global gross box office earnings might be for the movies Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, The Bikeriders, The Fall Guy, The Garfield Movie, and If, because their expected future earnings are currently too small or possibly non-existent. For Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, with its current global gross box office revenue of $395.4 million and its estimated break-even point range of $412.5 million to $495 million, the movie currently stands to lose between $17.1 million to $96.9 million in global gross box office revenue. For The Bikeriders, with its current global gross box office revenue of $32.6 million and its estimated mid-range break-even point of $100 million, the movie currently stands to lose around $67.4 million. For The Fall Guy, with its current global gross box office revenue of $177.5 million and its estimated mid-range break-even point of $312.5 million, the movie currently stands to lose around $135 million in global gross box office revenue. For the Garfield Movie, with its current global gross box office revenue of $245.4 million and its estimated break-even point range of $150 million to $180 million, the movie has made bank. For the movie entitled If, with its current global gross box office revenue of $185.8 million and its estimated break-even point range of $275 million to $330 million, the movie currently stands to lose around $89.2 million to $144.2 million in global gross box office revenue. Then by dividing the global gross box office revenue losses by 2 to account for the 50% of gross box office ticket sales that movie theaters keep for themselves, the affected studios currently stand to lose the following. For Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, Disney and 20th Century Fox currently stand to lose around $8.6 million to $48.4 million. For The Bikeriders, Regency and Tri-State Pictures currently stand to lose around $33.7 million. For The Fall Guy, Universal Pictures currently stands to lose around $67.5 million. And for the movie entitled If, Paramount Pictures currently stands to lose around $44.6 million to $72.1 million. And that now brings us to the movies whose final domestic and global gross box office revenues I am currently projecting, which includes Despicable Me 4, Inside Out 2, Fly Me to the Moon, A Quiet Place Day 1, Bad Boys Ride or Die, and Horizon: An American Saga Chapter 1. Now, as for the movie Despicable Me 4, given that it's actually the 6th movie in a franchise that began in 2010, I can use box office data from the franchise's previous 5 movies to calculate a franchise average weekly drop of only 27.18%, which is very good. And using the related standard deviation of 4.94%, I can create a statistically defined range of possible average weekly drops for Despicable Me 4 that's one standard deviation above and below the franchise average, which gives me a range from 22.24% to 32.13%. And using that range, I can project that the final domestic box office for the movie may range from $397.7 million at the low end, $446.7 million at the mid-range, and $515 million at the upper end, which is a more narrow range than last week's projection. And using the movie's current domestic share of 48.22%, which fell well below 2 standard deviations from the franchise average domestic share of 35.64%, I can project that the final global gross box office earnings for the movie may range from $824.8 million at the low end, $926.4 million at the mid-range, and $1,068.1 million at the upper end, which is a higher range than last week's projection. And this week's projection maintains the strong likelihood that Despicable Me 4 is going to outperform Dune Part 2 and become 2024's second highest grossing movie behind Inside Out 2 in several weeks. And the movie definitively made bank as of this weekend with its current earnings. For Inside Out 2, assuming a range of possible average weekly draws from 30 to 40%, I can project that the final domestic box office for the movie may range from $630.2 million at the low end, $643.7 million at the mid-range, and $661.4 million at the upper end, which is a slightly lower and more narrow range than last week's projection. Then by using the movie's current domestic share of 42.41%, which is lower than last week's, I can project that the movie's final global gross box office earnings may range from $1,486 million at the low end, $1,518 million at the mid-range, and $1,560 million at the upper end, which is a slightly higher and more narrow range than last week's projection that further increases the likelihood that the movie will be able to outperform last year's highest grossing movie, Barbie, and its $1,432 million. For A Quiet Place Day 1, assuming a range of possible average weekly draws from 30 to 40%, I can project that the final domestic box office for the movie may range from $149.6 million at the low end, $157.5 million at the mid-range, and $167.9 million at the upper end, which is a lower range than last week's projection. Then by using the movie's current domestic share of 52.66%, which is about the same as last week, I can project that the final global gross box office for the movie may range from $284.1 million at the low end, $299.1 million at the mid-range, and $318.9 million at the upper end, which is a lower range than last week's projection. And given the movie's current global gross box office of $220.7 million, it fully made bank this weekend. For Fly Me to the Moon, assuming a range of possible average weekly draws from 30 to 40%, I can project that the final domestic box office for the movie may range from $25 million at the low end, $28.6 million at the mid-range, and $33.3 million at the upper end. Then by using the movie's current domestic share of 52.63%, I can project that the final global gross box office for the movie may range from $47.5 million at the low end, $54.3 million at the mid-range, and $63.2 million at the upper end, which is nowhere near the movie's mid-range estimated break-even point of $250 million. So the movie is a flop and currently stands to lose somewhere between $186.8 million to $202.5 million in global gross box office revenue, which when divided by 2 to account for the 50% of gross box office ticket sales that movie theaters keep for themselves, means that Apple Original Films currently stands to lose around $93.4 million to $101.3 million, making it one of the biggest flops of 2024 so far this year. For Bad Boys Ride or Die, assuming a range of possible average weekly draws from 30 to 40%, I can project that the final domestic box office for the movie may range from $196 million at the low end, $198.6 million at the mid-range, and $202 million at the upper end, which is a more narrow range than last week's projection. And with the movie's current domestic share of 48.91%, I can project that the final global gross box office for the movie may range from $400.7 million at the low end, $406 million at the mid-range, and $412.9 million at the upper end, which is also a more narrow range than last week's projection. But with the movie's current earnings of $378 million, the movie has already made bank. For Horizon and American Saga Chapter 1, assuming a range of possible average weekly draws from 30 to 40%, I can project that the movie's final domestic box office revenue may range from $34.5 million at the low end, $36.2 million at the mid-range, and $38.5 million at the upper end, which is a lower range than last week's projection. then by using the movie's current domestic share of 94.96%, which is slightly lower than last week's, I can project that the final global gross box office for the movie may range from $36.3 million at the low end, $38.1 million at the mid-range, and $40.6 million at the upper end, which is lower than last week's projection and nowhere near the movie's estimated break-even point range of $125 million to $150 million. So the movie is a flop and currently stands to lose somewhere between $84.4 million to $88.7 million in global gross box office revenue, which when divided by 2 to account for the 50% of gross box office ticket sales that movie theaters keep for themselves, means that New Line Cinema currently stands to lose around $42.2 million to $44.4 million. Thus, Flying Me to the Moon, Horizon, and American Saga Chapter 1, If, The Fall Guy, and The Bikeriders all remain definite flops, while Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes remains a probable flop. But Inside Out 2, Despicable Me 4, A Quiet Place Day 1, Bad Boys Ride or Die, The Garfield Movie, Dune Part 2, and Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire have all made bank. Thanks for watching today, and a huge thanks to everyone who has subscribed to our channel. We appreciate your support. If you enjoyed this video, please press the like button, and please feel free to share a comment. If you'd like to help support this channel, please press the red subscribe button, and please press the bell to receive notifications for new content. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and Twitter by clicking on the links in the description. Until next time, this is Out Loud Geek.